Damos inicio a la Feria Carrera que
Let us begin the career fair that we've been following throughout this week. It's been considered as one of the favorite sections with our audience. Today, we'll delve into details about those elements that turn us into a CV that is much more robust and with impact. Let us listen to Mireya Cruz and Andrés Arango, our IDB specialists, who will tell us more about their experience. And we'll invite you to review your strategies when submitting a CV and how to strengthen the CV. Let me go to them and let me follow Mireya and Andres. Hello, good afternoon, and welcome, everyone. Thank you, Veronica. We wish to extend to you the most cordial welcome to our career fair. We want to work with you on how to build the best recipe so that you can have the CV, the best CV in your hands, and you can get as far as possible. My name is Andres Arango. I'm a specialist in human resources, diversity, and specialist. I'm new. I've been here for 2 months, but I'm very happy to be able to share this afternoon, not only with those who are following us from home, but also with Mireya. Mireya, welcome to the stage. And now I'll give you some time so that you can introduce yourself and people will get to know you. I'm delighted to be with all of you. My name is Mireya Cruz. I've been working for the IDB for 8 years. I'm from Venezuela. I work on recruitment, and I'm very happy to be here with you, sharing these tips so that you can submit your CVs to our apps. And I'm very happy also for being able to show you that we're very dressed very much in key with a theme. We want to show that the bank, on top of everything else, is really worried about integrating the community and be able to show that we're an inclusive employer. So we are open to receiving applications from the entire community. And if you have friends or people you know who are part of the LGBTQ community, you can ask them to invite them to this section to hear all the tips. So welcome to share the link so more people will connect and they'll be with us this afternoon. And since we have a special recipe that we're following today, Mireya, tell us a little about this, because at home, everyone will be a chef. You will all be a chef for one afternoon. How does a chef get ready for this fair in order to build the same CV, the best CV? This will be like a cooking recipe. A good chef has to prepare everything ahead of time. Well, how can we prepare? The way in which you can do this is to have something to write on: pencil, paper, the old ways, or how well, the way you feel more comfortable. You can have a notebook, an iPad, the telephone, wherever, but take note of the tips that we will be sharing with you so that you can share your apps and your CVs and that you'll be successful. We'll start with the beginning. When you cook a recipe, it is important to have a context as to what the recipe is about. Tell us, Mireya, what is a CV? It might seem very obvious, but for those watching us, we can clarify what a CV is. Very simple, Andres. A CV is nothing else but the letter of introduction, who you are, what you bring with you, what do you offer, what your talent is, and what added value you contribute to the employer you aspire to work for. So this announces who you are. It is a way you sell yourself to this employer. It is very important that this be focused on what you want for the future, not fully and completely what happened in the past or what you didn't have in the past. So, as a part of this experience, your CV shows your current picture of yourself as a professional, and therefore it shows not only your grades, your academic grades, but also your experience in the workplace and everything you bring with you, which adds value to the position. Okay, tell us a little bit about this recipe that we're building today. Why is it important to follow this recipe? Why is a CV so important in the work life of the people watching us today? Well, Andres, not only because it is the way you introduce yourself, but also it will enable you to have a point of entry to this position that is of interest to you. So when you present your CV, you are showing something. That is to say, the added value that you bring with you. The ultimate objective in presenting the CV is not getting that position, but making yourself know how, getting to the interview. This opportunity is a golden opportunity, a brilliant opportunity, so that you can let these people know, the people who are participating in the interview, who you are and what your talent is. And also, it is extremely important to see this moment when you present your CV, because you can have contact with whoever is participating in that application for that position. It is also a golden opportunity so that you can expand your network of professionals and obviously for you to be able to include those people who will be participating in the interview in your LinkedIn, as we recommended this on Monday during the workshop. Thank you, Mireya. And as in the restaurants, many times we get there, we see the menu full of different dishes. I would imagine that the CVs are things that you've seen in your background many times at forums. Tell us what sort of CVs exist. That's a very good question, Andres. And people get confused with the design versus the types of CVs. In general terms, we have three models that exist. We have the chronological model, the functional model, and the last one is a combination of both. Obvious, since we have so many new professions, there are many novel things. There's CVs that are presented differently, but in general, they include the three components. And these models of CVs that are just like our stronger dishes of this recipe will be made up by different ingredients. And talking about ingredients, Mireya, let us share this with our audience. What are the characteristics of each one of these CVs? Because the recipes are different. They have different ingredients. What characteristics do we find in these CVs? Well, we have the appetizer. Let's talk about the chronological CV. The chronological CV is very useful for many of the professionals. Why? Because it is presented in following an order where you will be talking not only about your experience in the workplace, but also academic grades, always showing the most recent, starting with the most recent to the oldest. So this CV is very useful for those who've had a linear career in their professional life, who have not had any space, any vacuum, or any gap where they had to stop working for whatever circumstances. So this model of a CV is ideal for those who have had a linear trajectory in their career and in what is needed in order to project. In this edition in particular is that we will be presenting what has been the development in our career without greater emphasis in the skills and the different professionalizations, changes in career that we've had or that we could have had. And we're missing a last one. Yes, we need two more. Okay, let's move on to the next recipe. This is really important, Carlos, very important. Why? Because the functional model is the one where you can use, that is to say, those people that for some reason had a break in their career because you're a woman, you had a baby, or because you practice some sports and you had an accident and you had to be absent, you were disabled for some time. So when you have these breaks in your career, this is the best CV that you can present. Why? Because it focuses on your skills, on your talent, on what you bring. So why this stands out, this part of the skills, you refer to everything that has to do with your experience in the workplace in different companies or different work exposures. And in addition to that, you include academic grades in which you've participated. So before you go on to the last one, the people who share with us on the chat, what is the CV that is most widely used of these two? What do we see in social media? And you will tell us about the last recipe. The last recipe, very simple. It is combined between these two. It means that out of these two main dishes, you choose the best ingredients in order to put everything together in one specific dish. So we can have a CV that mentions your professional experience, but it stresses and highlights your skills and the different components that stand out in this unique experience. So within that description, we include the skills that stand out for that time in particular, where we played a specific role. And in addition to that, we include everything that has to do with the name of the company, the year where we worked for that company, all that information that is specific to that experience. And obviously, in everything that has to do with the academic side of it, we include the information. And something that is important is that we highlight there What are the subject matters or the courses that are more relevant that are related to that position? So this model envisages a combination of both the models, the chronological and the functional, in order to combine both or blend them into one. And some people from our audience must be wondering and taking advantage of the expert chef that you are. What is your favorite CV? Share with us why this is your favorite. Well, I love it when I see a combined CV because it is easy to read, easy to understand the experience that is brought by this person, the talent that is highlighted that stands out, and that the person is discussing it in the academic and personal side of it. So it's easy to read a combined CV, but it all depends on your reality. One would be better than another one. Okay, so you already know, those who are following us, identify what is the best CV in keeping with your needs and the type of position you are applying to. But in all recipes, salt and pepper, that is something that has to be present for the recipe to be perfect, as well as the rest of the ingredients. Tell us a little bit about those spices that can never miss in a recipe. Well, Andres, within these key ingredients, as you were saying, salt and pepper, I can present a perfect CV. I can have all the information very clear, very well structured, very well presented. But then I forgot how do they contact me? So salt and pepper in this case is my contact info, could be my telephone number, could be email. Remember, your LinkedIn information is very important because it will allow us as recruiters to see additional information about yourself, much more than what you can have on a CV. So your essential elements that should be included are obviously your name, your contact telephone number, your email, so that we can contact you, and the LinkedIn. There are people who also include their physical address, and this is important depending on where you're applying. We see that there's a model, and we have it as the third model of a CV that we're protecting, where the address is important if you're applying to a multilateral, if you're applying to a position outside your country or to an international organization. So that gives an idea to the recruiter as to where you are located. What cannot happen, Andres, is that you include your email or the physical address of the office or the current employer that you have. Why? Because these are resources that belong to the company. So it's not well seen that we include the email for our employer. It has to be our personal email. Now, with these essential tips, this part is crucial in order to have a very good recipe of a CV. And we have a question. And like the menus in restaurants, many are full of pictures where you can taste and see what you want and what you want to choose in the restaurant. But in the case of the CV, what happens with pictures? Do you recommend pictures? Don't you recommend it? Because in many of our countries, and no doubt those who are watching us will have these CVs with pictures. What lies behind this? Should we do it or not? No, we shouldn't do that. There are certain countries where this is used, particularly in Europe, especially for the IDB group. We do not ask for pictures. We don't recommend that pictures be included. As a recruiter, I recommend not to do this in a general way unless they're requested in the application. Why not? Because a picture, when we attach a picture, we're activating the possibility of having a bias by the recruiter. So, to the extent that we don't show a picture, it goes in keeping with our information. And ultimately, what we see as recruiters is your talent. We don't need to see how you look. So, it is important for the picture not to be something that adds up to know whether you're the adequate candidate or not. And in addition to that, to share you that in the IDB group, we have an ongoing effort to avoid the biases in selection and recruitment processes. For these to be objective, we train permanently all those who are members of a panel so that they can deliver the best interview, and that to be rest assured that we're assessing their experience, their education, and this is a part of the process of a cultural change that we must see not only at the IDB but in all organizations in Latin America and the Caribbean. And tell us something, because we know that many a times in restaurants, we ask for an appetizer first or a main dish. What would be the first thing you include in our CV, and what should we include as an appetizer in this recipe? The appetizer or the hors d'oeuvre is your summary of your professional profile. Nothing else that just a brief description, 3 lines perhaps, telling us who you are, where you stand out, X years of experience in XYZ areas, and then you will stand out of a group of 5 or 6 skills listed. What is important is that this is a summary of yourself. So this appetizer will allow the reader to know what they will find later on. Very good. In order to optimize these 3 lines that we have as an appetizer to our CV. And then we come to the main dish, the entree. What should we include in the entree or the main dish? And how can we make it shine, which is the information that will be read by the recruiter in our CV? In this case, our main dish is the professional experience and academic grades, your education. In these 2 components, the work experience, ideally what you describe, including the most recent experience and all the way down to the oldest. We must be consistent with the information we're presenting. It is very important because the structure of your professional CV that tells you as a recruiter when you're reading how organized and how methodical the person is, how detailed description the person is when doing its work. So when you reflect this, following an order is important. So you should include the title, the position that you held in the institutions you worked for, the name of the institution, the country where it was located, the year and the month. That's really important because for us as a recruiter, it tells us how long you were in that position, working for that position with the roles that you're describing. And when you give us an overview of what you did in that position, it's important to highlight achievements and goals. If you can include data to support your achievements, much better. And if by chance the title or the position is not widely known in the market, or the company is not so widely known, you can add perhaps 1 or 2 lines to describe that position or that institution. So we must include achievements and have a complete description of the different activities that were entailed in that previous work. Yes, and under academic achievements, we follow a structure, chronological order, the most recent to the oldest. And if you have pre-grad studies, it is not necessary to include the previous studies. Once you are going to college and postgraduate degrees, what is important is pre-grad and onwards because you're already university professional. So when you include the information, it's important to state the title, the institution where you studied, and the year when you began and when you graduated, or the tentative year for graduation. If you haven't graduated, you can include the tentative date. That is completely valid. If, as part of the studies, there was a subject matter that was linked to the position you're applying with, just say that you studied that subject matter for the recruiter to see that you are interested or you are related to that position that you're applying for. We get another question from the public, Mireia. They say, if I studied for this recipe in my CV, I have several studies, but maybe they're not strictly linked or related to the position I'm applying for. Do you recommend that we include it in that recipe, or that is an ingredient that shouldn't be considered? If it is formal education that we call pre-grad and post-grad, I do recommend that you include it. If it is a certification course or specializations or brief courses, I don't recommend that you include them if they're not connected to that and if they're really old, because certifications have to be updated. So typically, beyond the 5 years, it is not recommended because it is out of date. And for that information, the ideal section is not formal education, but another section, a separate section that we have in the CV. So you're getting very important, very relevant tips in order to build a successful recipe and be able to have the recruiter fall in love with it. Now, Mireya, tell us, how could we add another ingredient? What else should be included in this recipe besides the grades, the experience, achievements? What else could be found there? Just like any recipe, any good dish always has side dishes, and we have side dishes here. And the side dishes in this entree are the skills, the abilities, somewhat additional information that you can include. Do not forget that you should include everything that has to do with knowledge about computers, knowledge about a specific area, skills, or something that has to do with these abilities or skills, and languages. If you apply to a multinational, the language section is extremely relevant. Anything else that we're missing? One last section, which is optional, and we might include it or not. In this case, is whether we've had some awards, recognitions, if we have any publications. Some people have a lot, but remember, optimize, make the best use of the space. If you have a lot of publications and you're devoted to research and you have a whole lot of publications, don't include everything here. You can include a link to your LinkedIn page, and the recruiter can see what are the different publications in which you've been involved. And if you are a member of an institution, an entity, that is important information for your application, and you can also include it. Very interesting, because we start building slowly, little by little, the recipe. I hope that everybody's taking note of this so that you will take this as a guide. You'll go back home and you decide how you want to put together this recipe for your CV, and that you amend it for it to be much more attractive and get your dream job, and to include the characteristics that you're bringing to the recipe. And regarding the appearance of this recipe, they say that food, people fall in love with their eyes. This is what they say in our countries. And this also applies to the CVs, just exactly the same thing. When, as a recruiter, you see a CV with spelling errors that is not well prepared, well designed, well structured, that has mistakes, grammatically speaking, just like food is something that you fall in love with through your eyes, the appearance of a CV is also important. You have to be careful with the margins, grammar, spelling, not to use too many resources such as capital letters, underlined, bold. These are elements that help, but they have to be used in an intelligent way so as not to saturate the information and lead the reader to be glad about reading your information. In addition to that, it is very important, and this is a very important tip, Andres, that the verbs to be used are action verbs. There's a lot of difference between an action verb and a verb that maybe doesn't say too much, and it doesn't express so much about what the person has done in their professional career.
So it's important that you also focus on achievements and successes throughout your professional career. That only includes relevant information. This means that if there's something that is not relevant for that position that you're applying for, just omit it. You're not lying about anything. You're just putting in what is considered of relevant importance for the position. Then the final tip that we leave you with is please be honest. That doesn't mean that I'm going to, if I'm omitting information, it doesn't mean that I'm dishonest. Now, if I invent something, then I am dishonest. If I decide what I'm going to put in, because let's say I don't have enough space and I want to emphasize a part of my career background compared to other because of what's needed for the position, then that would be advisable. And some of you might feel identify with this, that when we apply for the IDB, I remember in my case, I screened out what was ideal to be put into my CV, and that took time. So as we continued in our conversation with Mireya, remember that this requires time. You can't just do this in 1 hour. We need be able to refine and fine tune this resume. So devote more time so that you can again review and also maybe make some changes or adjustments to your resume. When we go to a friend's house, we may have a main recipe, but suddenly this other dish might appear. And that additional dish is what I'm talking about now, the cover letter, which is from the perspective of a recruiter who is receiving these recipes constantly. I think this is a nice added value. The cover letter might make the difference between success or not. It may be required or it may not be required. From my perspective, I recommend that you add it, but it's not mandatory unless the position requires a cover letter. So when we talk about the cover letter, as you said, it's basically one more additional dish. So we need to understand that this is a resource that we need to make sure we're smart in the way we use it. We're not going to repeat the same content that we have in the resume. We're going to add information that shows our motivation for the position that we're applying to. It's very, very straightforward. Sometimes people think that the cover letter is supposed to be lengthy, detailed. No, it's a very simple undertaking from that perspective. Maybe 5 paragraphs where you have an introductory, greetings, then 3 main paragraphs, and then the concluding paragraph. And in those paragraphs, the first paragraph that serves as an introduction, just you need to express the motivation and why you're interested in occupying that position. And you can also mention in this paragraph that is introducing in the cover letter, maybe repeat some specific key point, but then the rest of the body of the letter, that's where you highlight your talent, your background, and your skills that are the reason why you are adequate for this position. And you don't do this lightly. You need to sit down and carefully review it, digest it, analyze the content, and then you include the information that shows exactly what your skills and what your talents are that you're going to add to this job. And then the final paragraph is when you open the possibility and discuss the possibility of establishing future contact, and then you sign it. So it's basically a cover letter that's very straightforward. This is a dish that will hopefully whet the appetite of whoever's going to be reading it. Who do you feel comfortable when you're cooking and well, I like to cook for my family, for example. I like to cook for my friends. And though I'm not an expert, but sometimes when we cook for our family and our friends, our objective is to make sure that they enjoy what we're doing, that they savor it. So I think here we need to think in the same terms. How can we make sure that that of course, we're interested in getting the interview and getting the job, but what are we going to do to make them to like it? Well, when we look at the main dish that we're cooking, which is the interview, and it's very important, we are thinking about our ultimate target audience. Who is going to be looking at that resume? Well, it's going to be consisting of 6 key components: the contact information, a summary of your professional profile, your work experience, education, which is extremely important, also your skills set, and other information that may be applicable and of interest. This all needs to be included in your resume structure. Once you've come up with that final output, depending on it's going to depend on exactly who you're targeting this to. It's not a question that you're going to have one sent to everyone. No, you need to adapt it, just like you adapt your recipe based on who you're cooking it for. Are you cooking it for your family, your friends? Is it for a wedding? So we need to make those necessary adjustments for those special occasions. In this case, we're making adjustments that fit in the context of the employer, potential employer who's reading it. So Also, you need to get a hold of someone, another set of eyes, a friend who can provide a feedback and ask how they view it. Because sometimes when we're cooking something, we may lose sight of some mistakes. So in this case, just as in cooking, you need to get a second set of eyes and another opinion. So you also, again, you need to get a feedback from the cover letter because they complement each other. And we need to make adjustments to both information, both the letter and the resume, depending on who we are targeting this to, including making adjustments to our work profile. And when I save my information, I'm going to send it an application. I need to save it with my name, my first name, last name, and the year that I prepared this, because this will give me a record. So exactly who and where are we sending this information and the content. Great. I think we're doing pretty well so far with the recipe. And I think you're all going to enjoy it. When we read the ingredients and the tips, the cooking tips, it's going to be a lot easier. Here we have another question. Now, sometimes we begin to throw in other ingredients, thinking that it's going to be spicier or tastier. So what are the things that, should we not do? Well, again, don't include a photo. And there are other things that are not relevant when you're in the process of applying for a job and addressing your next personal, or for example, personal information is not relevant. Whether you're married or not, whether you have a driver's license, unless the position that you're applying for requires a driver's license, then the situation changes. If you have any hobbies, great. If you like certain activities, but if it's not relevant for the position you're applying to, then you don't really need to include it. Information regarding the number of children or who you're living with, none of that is relevant. That can be omitted from the contents. And in some of these recipes that we've seen over time, in many, you also include the salary range in their CV. Now, sometimes in the menu, you're going to see the price of the entree, but many you don't. Well, no, in the menu, you do see the price of the entrees. Now, in this case, and we're going to talk about, well, in the salary range, this is not the right time to mention that. We recommend that you not include a salary range and then wait once you get into the negotiations, once you're already within the recruiting process, that's when you can start talking about the potential salary range for this position. That's when you can start thinking in those terms. The thing that counts now is that you need to present your skills, your talents, and how can they contribute to the organization. Now, regarding language skills, we're from many countries today, and many people who are watching us want to apply to the bank. So what would be the ideal language? Are there general rules for submitting a CV? That's a question that comes up quite a bit. Many people think that if they apply to a position for an IDB job in Latin America, then it's better that you submit the CV in Spanish. If you're going to submit your resume to headquarters in Washington, D.C., you send it in English. Well, that's not really true. You can submit the resume either in English or Spanish. It doesn't make a difference. But of course, the IDB has 4 official languages. And aside from English, Spanish, we have Portuguese and French. But within our human resources team, ideally, is that you submit the resume either in English or Spanish so that it can be reviewed by anyone who involved in the office. Because even though we have the 4 official languages of the IDB, not everybody speaks them. So just as in the recipes, when we need to understand, we need to know who our guests are. We know that the bank is multicultural with many languages, but this is information that'll help us to better understand how we can improve on the recipe. Well, you need to know that potential in the future employer. This is a very important element in the placing your facing your next professional challenge. It's not just a question of submitting a resume. Do you identify with the organization? Where's the common ground? And once you get to know the organization and to see the team behind that job posting, then you're going to look at things. You're going to look at your own resume with a different set of eyes. In other words, your recipe as you forward that for that position. And I'm sure some of you have thought that when you prepare that resume, do I store it in CV format, or I mean in PDF format, or in Word format? Well, PDF is the ideal format to save it. If there's some issues, you can also send it in Word format, but ideally is to save it in PDF, because then the information is already recorded and there's no possibility of anything being changed within the process. So sending it in a PDF document is ideal. We have our human resources team, when they receive the these documents in Word and they move on to the next recruiting step, then we take the step of converting it into PDF so that we avoid any accidents along the way, any information that could be changed. So as we prepare, as we cook up our CD, we know that the people doing it are young. So what about when they're applying and to entry level positions where they don't have a lot of experience? What do you recommend from your perspective? How do we prepare the resume in that for that? Well, the bank has positions where we welcome people who don't have any work experience, including the internships. In internships, we don't require any work experience, and they're open for any students who are interested in working with us. So if you don't have work experience, then internships are your best option. If you have a little bit of work experience, you need to reflect that in your CV and show exactly what you've done. In this case, the volunteer activities are crucial. If you've done any volunteer work with very little experience, then you need to put that in your resume. And as we've learned to cook these and prepare these recipes, before we leave, are there anything else that you would like to say to our potential chefs? Well, we're just very pleased and ready to receive your resumes. We would love to get to know you. We'd like to hear about your interest in our institution, and we want you to know that we are an inclusive organization and we warmly welcome you and ready to bring on board people with any background that could complement our efforts. We believe in diversity, and we know that that makes the difference in the future. And just before I bid farewell, I would just like to say on behalf of the IDB that we welcome and value the applications from a diverse range of applicants. So we invite you to do it. Join us through the social media and work with the recruiters who are here to help. And if you would like to share this session, please do so. Thank you very much. Well, we now reach the end of our next to last day of the Knowledge Week activities. We now have tomorrow. So we're looking at working on developing innovation for Latin America, the Caribbean, and the public sector. We also hope that the advice shared today in our career fair will be useful for all of our audience members. And we're about to conclude Knowledge Week, but I would just like to remind you about some specific points. First of all, you can now download your accreditation, and that way you can say that you attended these events. In fact, you have the QR code on the screen that will help you in your digital experience and background. We had blue, dark blue, light blue, navy blue. Yesterday, we had, again, light blue. And today, it's a different color. That way you're going to have all of the badges, different colors. So tomorrow we're going to be talking about climate change, and we will then have our grand finale. So we're going to be looking at these areas that include research, panel discussions, working together with the IDB Academy for this to be possible. Secondly, we have resources from the private sector that and these are publications in addition to the online courses for all of the entrepreneurs. Some of them were asking on the social media, so how could they learn about getting these access to these initiatives that drive IDB Invest and IDB in their efforts. So please go to the IDB Academy webpage and you'll find a lot of the resources that are free of charge in the agenda section that is in the lower part of the screen. And don't forget to please fill out the satisfaction survey. We want your opinions and your feedback because this is going to help us to continue to improve these experiences and improve our edition for next year. So tomorrow we conclude the event and we will officially graduate. We're going to cover one of the most urgent issues, climate change. So in fact, you can see on the screen the speakers we have scheduled for tomorrow. Any agenda, any project that we propose needs to include the environmental footprint. Development goes hand in hand with climate change initiatives. So we're going to see you tomorrow, and you can please download your credentials. You can do it on the social media, LinkedIn, and you can also download that excellent recipe on preparing successful resumes. And now you can add your credentials to these to your resume. So just go into hashtag IDB Academy and at IDB Twitter, as well as Instagram. You can find our LinkedIn profile and also begin to establish valuable contacts. So we're going to see you tomorrow. We conclude our next to last day in a very exciting way as we move toward.
Es tiempo de mirar hacia adelante, de reimaginar el presente y futuro. Es hora de explorar, debatir y sorprenderse. La Semana de Conocimiento Academia VID es un espacio único para interactuar con conocimiento de vanguardia, práctico y relevante. Construye nuevas redes, encuentra nuevas oportunidades y conéctate con el conocimiento que está marcando el futuro de la región. Es tiempo de mirar hacia adelante, de reimaginar el presente y futuro. Es hora de explorar, debatir y sorprenderse. La Semana de Conocimiento Academia VID es un espacio único para interactuar con conocimiento de vanguardia, práctico y relevante. Construye nuevas redes, encuentra nuevas oportunidades y conéctate con el conocimiento que está marcando el futuro de la región.